Welcome everyone to the Adversity to Advantage podcast. I'm very excited because it's taken almost 2 years to get this guy across for me on the podcast. His name is Thomas Bell, but also known as Bipolar Businessman. I saw Thomas speaking at an event. I believe you got up and got everyone in sort of law firms and boring jobs to get really involved. And that's why I sort of clucked you and introduced myself. Welcome to the show, Thomas.
Thank you very much. Very pleased to be here.
It's great to have you here. So fill in the blanks a little bit. What is it that you do? What are you passionate about at the moment?
So at the moment, I am passionate very much about magic. I have taken a long journey through the world of mental health. I've worked with a number of different businesses. I started my kind of journey about 3 years ago in early 2016. When I decided that not enough men were standing up and talking about mental health. And as a chap who has a background as a bit of a thespian, I was thrown out of drama school for my mental health issues. There wasn't really a support network there. I felt that it was only, it was a purpose for me really at that point to say, okay, I can stand up. I don't really care what people think of me, to be honest. So maybe I should stand up where other men maybe can't. And if that empowers other guys to do the same, then there can't be anything wrong with that. So initially I started writing a blog called The Bipolar Businessman, obviously.
Yeah.
If you want to go to that blog, it's just thebipolarbusinessman.com. Like to keep things simple so you know exactly where you're targeting. And effectively, I'm not sort of a repressed writer or one of these kind of blog obsessed people. I just thought this is a good way to vent. I didn't really know what a blog was. I thought if you had a crap book and no one wanted to buy it, you probably had a blog. So I think it's probably become a lot more than that now. The millennials among us will probably stone me for that context. But I just wanted really a vent to kind of try and understand what was I going through every day, and also understand what the journey was in a sense. So not necessarily just, I've had a shit day, I'm going to put that down on paper, but also understand whether there was any positivity in what I was writing. So I wanted to know whether I was only driven to write something poignant off the back of a negative episode, or whether I was ever driven to write something off the back of a positive episode. And actually what I found over time is it's actually harder to write about positive things. It's much easier to write about negative things.
Why do you think that is? Are we just like bubbling up at that stage so it begins to overflow and it's just easier?
I think that for me personally, there's kind of an anxiety and an adrenaline when something offends you in some way. And I don't mean offend as in I'm pretentious and I care about what everybody says. I'm relatively chilled out. I'm a bit of a hippie. I like kind of most people. I'll kind of like to assimilate and just have fun with people nowadays. I can't be asked with any kind of stiff upper lip bullshit or that kind of pretense that comes with, our societal understanding of how to deal with individuals, let alone people with mental health, because there's a whole different ball game going on in terms of how we interact with other humans right now. Yeah. So I guess kind of I wanted to see how it would evolve me. And I think the problem is when you're enjoying yourself, certainly more recently, I try to just leave myself in that place of enjoyment. Mm-hmm. So I'm not thinking, oh, right, I better go and blog about this to let everyone know how much I'm enjoying myself, because that's not very present. And if we're all trying to be mindful and more focused on kind of what is giving us pleasure day to day, then that's kind of one of the primary factors, I think. I think we have to switch off. We have to try and lose that negativity. If I put a checklist down for how negative I am as an individual, obviously I'm proper British, so I love a good moan.
Yeah.
I love a good cue as well. If you can find me a cue, we'll stand in that. But I think British people, we gain strength from moaning. I've tried to explain this to a lot of people who don't get it.
Explain it to me, because I'm not British and it's beyond me.
It's a real driver for us.
Is it a bonding experience?
Say again?
Is it a bonding experience?
I think it's actually it is kind of that adversity.
Yeah.
You know, it could stem back post-war, etc., where you just have that camaraderie, the shit's hit the fan, but actually we're together, we're doing it together. And there is this kind of element of society here. But also overseas, when you go overseas and you meet Brits, it's kind of that same mentality. Oh, the beer's poor or X, Y, and Z. And you kind of find that commonality. But I think for me, actually, part of it is actually ridding yourself. It's like if you're in a relationship and you're in a healthy relationship and you bitch and moan at each other all the time and people think, wow, that relationship's going to fail. But you're getting off your chest, right? It's the guys who bottle it up for years and years, and that it's that repressed rage that can end that kind of relationship. So I think it's the same in terms of this state of affairs. We go through so many peaks and troughs as a society in general anyway, that I think that people just like a good rant. And if we have a bit of a bitch about something, it doesn't have to be a negative thing. That can sometimes deplete that negative energy to the point where you're driving forward with a different focus.
Can't it also become a negative, like, reinforcing loop of sort of being able to just notice the negatives rather than see the positives?
Yeah, so actually I feel that that's some kind of, there's something within me now that's not where I want it to be in terms of that mentality. So yes, I love a good moan. Yes, I fit with a Brit. But at the same time, if I counted on a daily basis, I did this the other day. So I've got 5-star hotel clients where I make uniforms for these organizations. And one of my 5-star hotel clients invited me to one of their hotels, okay, which is a silly amount of money for the room, silly amount of money for everything, really, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And I found it quite hard not to be negative, not necessarily about anything that the hotel had done specifically, but just generally. And because I was in this kind of calm place, I just started trying to pick up in my mind on what these negatives were. And, you know, I was walking down to the beachfront and trying to think about what was positive about that and things, but I got shit all up my trousers. I bought some new shoes. I didn't realize it was muddy on the way there. And I don't care about material things, right? So I look like a posh bastard because I like fancy clothes. But at the same time, I'm kind of chilled out about it. It's just stuff.
Yeah.
Right? If my kid paints all over the wall, it's just stuff. I can repaint it. Let's not get too much anxiety about it. There's enough stuff
to worry about, right?
Without that, right? So, but I was thinking, you know, oh Jesus, you know, I've stepped in this marshy bog. My shoes are wet. I've got shit all up my trousers, and not actual shit. Let's put that out there. Shit in the context of mud.
Yeah.
Don't want any people getting freaked out by this general conversation. But I just thought, how I'm being so negative about all these different attributes. And I continued to count and and I thought, I can't remember the last time I actually said something positive today. Even if it's a positive thing, it's almost got a negative spin. Like the sunset's beautiful, but wouldn't the sunset be more beautiful if that sodding guy wasn't in the way, standing in front of my picture? You know, it's kind of like, why do you need to find that? Why can't it still be beautiful irrespective of if the guy's standing there? You know, it's this mentality that we have, which I think can draw us back.
But I just want to identify, do you think that's just because of our kind of me, I always want more kind of culture? Does it have to do with your actual mental health and your brain wiring about how you see the world? Like, what do you think that, I mean, and then you could talk about the cultural Brit thing, but some people probably find it easier than others.
I think, you know, we're in a sort of capitalist oppressive society still to a degree where everybody wants things and everybody wants possessions.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, until you realize that that's not what life's about, you're going to be driven to this, right? And there's an anxiety behind not achieving whatever it is. So I say, you know, when I talk to businesses, I'm often saying, you know, at the start of our life, we're kind of sent to school and we're taught what to learn, but not really how to think for ourselves. Yeah. You know, then we sort of evolve And we get to the point where we're told that you kind of have to go to university, you have to get good grades. So we're imparting a structure of what you have to do to achieve success. And then you have to get driving, and you have to get your first car, and then you have to go to university, and then you have to pass university. And then when you come out, you've got a degree. No one really gives a shit, but you have to go and get a job, which is great for you because, you know, with your background and things like that, I've always been of the mindset that it's down to the individual. But in our society, initially, it was kind of, for a long time, it was very much about what.
Yeah, you get a mortgage, you get married, you die. Yeah.
And then you leave university, you try and get a job, you're looking for a girlfriend, you find a girlfriend, you have to get married, then you've got to get a house because that's the next thing, and that's a mortgage, so that's a worse situation because you've got more of a job to pay for that mortgage, and then you get married and you have kids and you've missed your life. And kind of this mentality has driven us globally to kind of drive towards possession. And the biggest issue for me in that is that we're never going to find that end game. You know, if you look at the Dalai Lama and all of the major players in this kind of space talking about mindfulness, they will all say the same thing, which is that we find a point of interest for ourselves to drive towards because that keeps us going day to day. But once we achieve that goal, we find the next point. So we're never going to be at the end of the journey. You might do that for the rest of your life, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're achieving anything.
No. Absolutely.
Also in a society where we're told that if we don't know what filter to put on or how to pout as a female, this is what really pisses me off. The kind of the female influencer online trying to make it look like they've got this perfect lifestyle. There was a great documentary actually called Fire Festival. There's a couple of documentaries about this Fire Festival, the greatest festival that never happened. And the whole concept is around these rich millennials buying $10,000 up to $250,000 tickets for this festival. And then it turned into a complete tragedy. It's brilliant. Search Fire with F-Y-R-E, and I think everybody's going to be excited to explore that journey with them. But we're in this society where that's the driver, and it doesn't mean that we're a better person because we know how to look better in an image. We're just trying to portray our life in the way that we feel that we've been programmed to acknowledge what's successful and what's not successful.
Yeah, which is making people unhappy, dissatisfied, and generally frustrated. And mental health issues are on the rise. So let's go right back, Thomas. Let's hear a little bit about your story. Sure. So first of all, what was the context like growing up? Like, was mental health talked about? Was it something that you were aware of well before your own sort of struggles with it?
No, to be honest, not really. I mean, my father was, he was, later on I found out he was a repressed homosexual. He was with my mother for 14 years. He was in a previous marriage prior to that. And my parents, my mum and dad, were together for about 14 years in this kind of oppressive, controlling, fucked up environment. So my home life was very aggressive. We had posters over most of the doors because they'd been punched through regularly. I think my earliest memory was of my dad smashing everything within my older sister's room. She was a few years older than me. And she hadn't done the washing up or something, or she hadn't loaded the dishwasher, something trivial, you know, which is why, kids, if you don't do the dishes, I'm not going to get upset about it. Life's too short. So I think you should have structure in your life, but I think you can go too far. So I kind of grew up in this environment where there was just anxiety, to the point where a police car, there was some sort of fight in the street, nothing to do with my dad, ironically, but there was a fight in the street one night when I was young, and all these police cars turned up with their sirens, and my mum said I was just out cold. So I developed a defense mechanism early on that you go to sleep in time of trauma. So I would kind of try and find a place where I could just go to sleep and then fall asleep, and then all of that would go away. But then I wet the bed probably until I was like 14, 15 years old. So there was some repressed kind of anxiety within my mind, because you can't just turn it off like that. It's still going to be knocking around. And so that was kind of very difficult for me. But there just wasn't anything relating to mental health. It was just, you kind of just had to accept.
That was your normal as well, that sort of context.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think my mother is gay, and she's got a female partner and things like that. So when my mother and father split up when I was about 12, 13, my mother at that point then had a female partner. And she had said, I felt that all my life. She didn't tell me this till I was about 21, 22 and really pushing for questions and answers. But she said, I've always felt like this, but we were never in a society where this was acceptable. Mm. So this is why people keep asking me if I'll write a book, because to have that on my mother's side and my father's side, but very much different kind of camps in a sense. Now my mother is kind of open to how she lives her life, but I never had the conversation with my father, and then he died and I found out all sorts of stuff after he died. So there was never a chance to kind of bridge that gap, take the more mindful Thomas Duncan Bell now, and then talk to my dad about kind of how to maybe even change. One of the biggest regrets for me actually is that I can't take what I've learned now and change.
How do you
change him?
Oh, change him, so support him.
And that's kind of frustrating, because I feel like I probably, maybe not, old guys nowadays, you get to a certain point, you're slightly set in your ways, right? So there's a restriction to some degree. But I think that in being able to understand that anger, as I was growing up, I just fought anger with anger. So as soon as I was big enough to stand up for myself, then it became a case of he was concerned as to whether I was going to kick his ass, right? Yeah. So it kind of got to this point where there was always this kind of power struggle. And I think the person I am now doesn't really need that. I don't really care who can kick anyone's ass. It doesn't really bother me. Whereas my dad would walk down the street, and if you caught eyes with him and he felt that you were looking at him in a specific way, he'd probably come and have a word with you.
Yeah.
And, and he had so much sort of rage invested within him that it could go any which way. He was a manic driver. He cut people up. He would, if you cut him up, he was a good driver, don't get me wrong. He was like a rally car driver, but if you cut him up, he would follow you home. And he'd have a pickaxe handle in his back seat. So if you wanted to kick off at him or you're a big lad, then didn't make any difference. It was this kind of this rage, constant rage. So I kind of had that in me when I left home and things, when if I went into a club and someone banged into me or whatever, there was this rage, and that was a very difficult thing to kind of get through. It's only now I don't have that same level of adrenaline for that. I realize how insignificant that is fundamentally when people have got other shit to deal with.
So there's obviously just some learnt behavior there, being in that kind of hectic environment. This sort of developed for you. Can you identify with the idea of having a rock bottom, or a point where it's a catalyst moment where things have gotten so bad that you think, I've got to do something about this?
Yeah, I think for me, there was just one night when I had a girlfriend, been with her for about 2 years. She'd gone out. I didn't have any money. I was poor. I didn't have pennies in the bank. I had nothing. My dad had died at this point, and I was just working in a sales company because I went to an old managing director I'd worked with when I was younger and said, look, I just need a job where I'm like 9 till 5. I can do it, sitting on my hands, but I don't have to think about running my own business, because at that time I'd probably run my own business for about couple of years, let's say.
Okay, so you've had that stressful experience.
Yeah, so I thought I just need some downtime. I need to get my head around what the hell is this. And so I did that. But my girlfriend at the time, she'd gone out to London. She'd turned off her phone. I thought she was having an affair, all this kind of stuff. And I took a knife and I cut my chest open. And I realised, like a combat knife, you know, I'm a martial artist at the end of the day. My father was a martial artist, so that's inherent, and we like weapons. But I'm kind of, I didn't know how to release anything. What my first instinct actually was, where can I get some alcohol? Mm-hmm. And because I didn't have any money at the time and I didn't have a penny in my bank, I was like, I literally haven't got any alcohol and I've got no way to knock myself out. Mm-hmm. So that was really hard because all I wanted to do was go to sleep, and I just couldn't go to sleep because the adrenaline was raging at that point where I just couldn't. So I cut my chest and I thought, this is a bad way. I'm in a bad way. And I remember I was in Guildford at the time. I went to the Guildford police station and I walked there. It was probably 45 minutes to an hour to the police station, I'd say. So I still had the adrenaline to the point where I would walk that far to seek help. And they took me in. Were
you intending to end your life? Or was it just this, I feel so overwhelmed, almost like self-harming, like I need it to release in some way?
Partly it was that, you know, when I was younger, I'd cut myself before and this kind of thing. And I've got tattoos and stuff, and the whole concept of, you know, losing blood to a degree, or that release of tension when you go through that kind of self-harming phase. So that, I guess, kind of there was an element of that, but also I'd tried to get counselling and support for depression and things before. Okay. And doctors had just said, okay, here's some
pills.
Here's some pills. Yeah. And I was like, no, thanks. This isn't great. Yeah. This isn't a great way to do things. Obviously, they're a little bit less American about it here, so it wasn't as bad. But that was the go-to. That was from the first meeting with the doctor. Like, no assessment. You don't know who the fuck I am. Yeah. You're prescribing me some pills right off the back. Yeah. Good work.
And you hadn't
way to numb society.
You hadn't been. Yeah, totally. That's exactly what happens. If you're not
I hadn't
numbing
had any
yourself,
diagnosis or anything at this point,
okay.
So I didn't know what was going on with me. Okay. So even through the period of drama school and everything, I even thought I was gay because I couldn't get a handle on how was I so sad, but I didn't know why I was so sad. And in my family, it's always been kind of a case of, don't talk about the fact you're sad, right? Just keep it on the down low. And so I didn't really have that outlet. I didn't feel I could speak to anyone. And I kind of went to this police station, I think because I thought in my mind, it sort of worked like, okay, you go to the police and they're open all hours. They're 24/7, the police. Excellent. So you just go there. And then they should be able to just give me a counsellor or someone to talk to, or there must be someone on call, for example. But that just wasn't the case, you know. And I went there and they took my details and my name and address. And they said, are there any friends you can go to or anything like that? I was like, it's fucking 3 a.m. You know what I mean? Firstly, none of my friends really know I've got any kind of depressive tendencies anyway. Right. And secondly, do I want to wake them up at 3 a.m. and go, hey, thinking I might kill myself. Do you mind getting stuck into that?
Yeah.
And try and help me out a bit. By the way, no build up. So they said basically your options are either you can go home or you can call a friend and try and go to theirs, or we can put you in a cell for the night and you can stay like in a police cell. And I was like, fuck that. Yeah. So I was like, okay. I said, don't worry, I'll just call a friend. And I went and I didn't call a friend. No. I was just like, I'm not calling my friends. It's the middle of the night. I'm just going to go home. So I wandered about for a bit and then I went home. I don't remember any more of that night, to be honest.
There's something quite powerful in just realizing that you had no friend that you would have been open with about like the real thing that was going on, the struggles, the messy bit, and just, you know, and now, as you know, you're so open and you have loads of people that you could just say, I'm feeling this, or, you seem to have set up that support network in a way. But I see so many people who are struggling in isolation they don't feel like they can talk to anyone. They feel like they're the only one feeling this way. They feel like they're going insane. And then with the little bits of help that you're requesting from professionals, getting that kind of disappointment, it just kind of makes you go, well, fuck it. Why would I even go anywhere? I've got to figure this out on my own.
For me, I'd when I got to that point, you know, things with that partner at the time escalated, and there were some violent episodes and all sorts of stuff. And it got to the point where I was eventually stood on a train track waiting to take my own life, you know, watching the lights come and thinking, okay, when am I going to jump in front of this thing? And that was kind of the catalyst for me, where I was like, I have to work out what the hell is wrong here. And so that's when I went to the doctors really properly for the first time and said, you know, I feel like I'm going to kill myself. What can we do about this? Because it's not cool.
How old were you when that moment happened, that catalyst?
Yeah. I would say something like around 2021.
Okay.
So we're talking kind of, how old am I now? I've lost all concept of space and time. Probably about, like, let's say I'm 34 now. So yeah, a while ago. But it was, you know, and I was in Guildford in Surrey. So I went to the doctors, and again, they prescribed medication. And I was like, okay, let's try this time. Let's just have a go. So I tried it for about a month. And I was working in sales, and it was great from about 10 a.m. till 3 p.m. And then it got to the point where I couldn't answer your questions. You know, I was doing business with, you know, places like the Hurlingham Club, where you need to be able to string a sentence together, because otherwise it's slightly embarrassing. And so by the end of a month, I just binned them, and I thought, this is shit. Let's get rid of it. I'm going to try and do this on my own.
Yeah.
But then I was upset at the fact that no one said, oh, you can get some free counselling and support. So I thought, okay, let's kind of try and chase that focus. So I went to A&E. And again, I thought, okay, the worst thing is I had to, at the time, I didn't feel like killing myself when I went into A&E, but I had to say that I did to get them to take me seriously, because they didn't give a shit. Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to say I'm going to kill myself and cry, because I'm an actor, so I can cry on demand if necessary. Let's do what I have to do to at least get someone with a degree, a useful one, to actually tell me what the hell is going on with me. And I sat with a guy for kind of 4 hours, and he gave me a list of questions at first, like 40 or 50 questions. And I started reading through these questions, and I said, you know, dude, these questions are all the same, buddy. You just worded them in a different way, right?
Yeah.
Because you're hoping that I'm going to go off in a tangent here, and I'm going to be all a bit manic over here. And I don't get that concept. But I was like, you know, you've got to kind of give me something that's a bit more dynamic than just the same set of 40 questions. I mean, they were really close to each other. They weren't even really, by the end, by like question 50, they weren't even trying. It was like, what is your name? What name is yours? You know, it's that kind of Yoda-esque thing. And you think, Jesus.
You're like, why? How are you trying to catch me out? Yeah.
Yeah, so like this is all to do with how you analyze what my issues are. And he said, okay, Thomas, you're on the bipolar spectrum. And I said, I don't really know what that is. And he said, well, you know, like Stephen Fry and guys like this, you know, you're not like bipolar 1 because you're not narcissistic enough. You're just pretty arrogant. So he was like, you're arrogant. And then I felt like a failure, because I was like, shit, man. I was going for all out arrogant, and you just shot me down and said I'm not even a narcissist.
I can't even win at this. Yeah.
Yeah, and he went, you're mildly arrogant. And I was like, mildly?
Better work on that.
Harder. Yeah. I'll try harder. So we went through this kind of process, and I don't ever remember him really explaining to me. He said, you've got emotionally unstable personality disorder, and this can all stem as well from your upbringing and not learning some of those societal traits that you would usually sort of learn if you've grown up in a stable environment where your parents are teaching you what they should teach you to fit into society.
Yeah.
Programming you, let's say.
Yeah, quite.
So I hadn't been programmed to fit into society. So apparently it's, my disorder meant that it sounded like at the time, like you were going to wake up with a horse's head in the bed, It's kind of like really weird.
Catastrophic, extreme thinking.
I didn't really take anything from it. They put me on a waiting list and they said, it could take anything up to 3 years for you to get this counselling. But I was adamant I wasn't going to pay for counselling just because I was like, I didn't really have that much money at the time anyway. So I didn't, and 50 quid an hour or more. I mean, I'm in Surrey, right? So we can't all afford to go and spend $5,000 a week on the Priory or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It would be nice to take 28 days out and have that time. But I've never had the money to be able to do that. And I didn't have parents in that sense who could support me financially to do this kind of thing. So I've never had a break. Since I left home, I don't feel like I've ever had a real kind of break for headspace to some degree. And I was on this waiting list, and eventually I split up with this girlfriend. I ended up moving to Essex, but then they flipped me onto another waiting list. And so I dropped to the bottom of that 3-month run again.
Yeah, you would.
And then after a year or so, I came back to Surrey and I flipped again to the bottom.
Yeah.
So then we're like, okay, this is kind of like a 9-year thing. But at which point I'd gone to another doctor. I'd said the same thing about, I'd made kind of attempts on my own life after that at a later stage through overdose and this kind of thing. And I still hadn't really got any kind of counselling. I paid for an anger management counsellor at one point for about 6 months or so and this kind of stuff, but it wasn't really
getting to the root and helping you understand.
It wasn't getting me anywhere. It wasn't driving me to the next level. So I thought at the end of the day, this is something that I've got to mentally stimulate myself. I've got to understand how I map my way. I think there's some sort of scientific process called remapping, I've found out now. But at the time I didn't know what that was. So I just kind of thought, okay, it's a mental thing. If it's a mental thing, I can train myself mentally to at least rid myself of some of the anxiety or get through certain periods.
Learn how to cope with it. Does that mean you started just educating yourself where you could while waiting for additional support? Or was it just, white knuckling it and struggling until some support became available?
To be honest, for a long time it was just white knuckling it. It was sex and drugs and rock and roll and not really knowing what the hell was wrong with me and this kind of thing
trying
still.
To escape in different ways where you could.
Yeah, and it wasn't very productive, to be honest, but I think more in recent years actually getting involved with the mental health space. I came in as a guy who didn't really know anything about the politics and the societal aspects of mental health. I've spoken quite openly about the NHS, which is far better now. And my sister has been a fairly senior nurse and things in the NHS and stuff like this. So I think the best thing about this country is that we've got an NHS and it's free and we can go and we can be saved and this kind of thing. But just at the time, there was nothing for me and there wasn't a support network. It wasn't like it is now. Now you could walk in and there's a whole range of things that you can get to kind of support you through that journey. But there just wasn't anything. So I think it took 10 years of the drinking and all this kind of other stuff that goes with it where you're thinking, and don't get me wrong, I don't think I was ever really an alcoholic, but if I went out, I was binging hard and then I was eating crap. And you just... Which
is a depressant as well, and then you're in that sort of cycle, right, of escape, recovery, anxiety's worse and it feels worse and, that whole cycle. Yeah. Yeah,
exactly. And I think that's been the biggest problem. But now actually talking... So when I came into the mental health space kind of back end of 2015, early 2016, that was when I started to look at, okay, what are the statistics involved in this? Is there anything that, we could put a dent in? The first statistic I picked up on was that 45% of onset mental health is down to workplace environment, how you live your working day, this kind of thing. And I thought, shit, that's like half of mental health, right?
Yeah.
So I thought there's definitely something in that. And no one was really talking about it still at that time. There wasn't a lot of buzz. It wasn't like on LinkedIn, you jump on and there's a positive story of something, which you get every day now.
Yeah.
So there was just nothing at that time. And so that was when I started the blog, and I started going to speak at events, and I was getting keynote speech. I mean, 2016 was mad to the point where I nearly burnt out just because I was being asked to come and speak everywhere.
And was that just off the back of the blog, like you doing your sort of ranting or release or trying to talk about it, and then you started realizing that men weren't around and you got noticed?
Actually, at first, it was because I went to a networking event and there was a mental health charity there called Oakleaf, who are kind of my primary mental health charity. They're like a vocational charity. So they teach people all sorts of vocational skills to get them back into work. So it could be anything from alcoholism through to military guy with PTSD. Mm-hmm. So they've got hundreds and hundreds of clients. And they were there because they're trying to promote. They don't get any crazy sponsorship and things like that because they've got a certain amount of publicity. But if you haven't got the BBC and all that jazz, people don't want to throw money in the pot, right? So they were kind of living on borrowed time. And I thought, okay, I want to kind of support these guys. And when they started, one of the ladies, Deepti, got up and did a speech about men's mental health. And it was at that point that I went, okay. And then when she spoke about the fact that men don't put their name to it, I thought, haven't got any money.
Yeah, but how else can I help?
Who gives a shit? How bad can it get?
Yeah.
Because at the time I was thinking, all I was caring about was like, what do people think of me from a societal perspective? And have I got enough money to be sustainable?
Yeah.
And so I was kind of like, okay, so I've tried this whole getting everyone to like me thing, fitting in with society, trying to drive for revenue. And fundamentally, everyone seems like a dickhead anyway. So what's the point in trying to pander to those arseholes? I'm going to basically just scrap all of that, only work with people that I like. Did it with my clients too. You know, a couple of years ago, I just went, okay, 650 customers gone, you know, and I've got probably 12 to 15 that I want to work with. Let's stick to those. And that's the majority of my revenue anyway, and this kind of thing. So I think when you get to that point where you can just take that out of your life and try and rid yourself of that social dynamic, it does frustrate me. If you walk into an IOD conference or whatever it is and you meet people who are disingenuous or, that pisses me off.
Yeah, it pisses me off.
A lot, and people are trying to pander to me all the time saying, oh, can you, after I set up the blog, you're right. It kind of, I guess that kind of was the catalyst for wider things. Mm-hmm. So my blog is not like the most well-read blog on the planet, right? But I've managed to reach 1 million people over the last 3 years through that spidering into all sorts of things, from the keynotes. At one point I was writing for a magazine which went out to 120,000 people a month. I've done Standard Life documentation. I've done Red Letter Days. I've done the Building Societies Association. I'm just about to write an article for HR Director magazine, and so all of these different things culminating into this one message kind of went out. And I met sort of how I was propelled into the keynotes, I guess, as a priority was because my blog was seen by a couple of vice presidents at Unilever. These guys sent it to a guy called Jeff McDonald, who we both know quite well. Mm-hmm. And Jeff invited me for a meeting and said, I've seen your blog. I like your blog. You're running small businesses. You're working with people who are SMEs effectively as well. And I was a FTSE 500 consultant, but I had a lot of focus on changing the mental health within smaller businesses because I was acutely aware of the fact that a big organization can do things because they've got money. Mm-hmm. So they just should, basically, or you're bullshit. And then the smaller businesses were like people like me, where actually you could end up jumping off a bridge if it really gets to that extremity. And so I thought, there isn't really any help for those people. There's not help for entrepreneurs to say, actually, it is okay to feel shit. And how do we evolve that for you? And how do we change your mindset? I think my biggest dream would be to have like a Dragon's Den / apprentice kind of mental health amalgamation, where I get a load of mentally challenged, let's say, directors and the CEOs, and I coach and narrate people through this journey of, okay, we've picked up all these mad people. They've all got these crazy ideas. He's got Asperger's, he's got ADHD, she's got bipolar, this kind of thing. And then try and coach them through this process, because I think
I love it.
That's kind of one of the things that, for me, that's always been missing, is there's just no guidance, you know? And if you don't seek guidance,
which you did a lot. Well, and especially not for people who want to achieve and be successful and run businesses and do all those things and may have a diagnosis or something that they're struggling with. There's almost this little assumption that if you've got a diagnosis, great, get some support, and then just like aim low, you know, aim low, work in like a 9 to 5, like maybe work part-time, hopefully get some support from other people, you know, that kind of thing. And that really annoys me as well, because I think there's something around choice. And yes, some people need that kind of support or even want that as part of their lifestyle. And there's no criticism about that. But I suppose what drew me to you is like, well, what about the people that fucking want to win and achieve at life and also have a past or a diagnosis or, you know, like where's the guidance or mentorship for those people?
When I was at school, we didn't have any kind of focus. So basically, I had some scouts looking at me as a youth Olympic swimmer when I was young. I was swimming from about 4 years old and competing from 6. So
you got that competitive
like 6
vibe.
days a week. Say again?
You got that competitive vibe in you.
Yeah, so I had that initially. Then when I went to school, my parents split up and things like this. Like I said, when I was 12, 13, and I'd been to a range of different swim clubs. You always get bullied because you're kicking everyone's ass. So I'd been through 4 or 5 swim clubs in different areas, always got bullied to the point where they were like, shit, if you can't beat them, join them, because he's kicking everyone's ass anyway, so we might as well hang out with the top guy, yeah? And you kind of went through this weird hierarchical thing. And for a kid who's going through that at home as well, that was very difficult. So when my parents split up, I decided that I would jack that in. And I then didn't have a purpose, and I was creating some disturbances at school and things like that. And a teacher said to me, you know, I want you to be in a play. And I said, okay, but I'm not doing any of that bullshit where you have to go and audition and all this kind of stuff. Just give me a part, I'll do it. And then I can get out of this after school detention so my mum doesn't have to come in and I'll get bollocked, you know. And so I did this play, and it was kind of, other than that, there was not really any guidance at school as to what can you do with your life. So then when I left and I went to drama school, my mum didn't want me to go on a gap year or anything because she thought I wouldn't go back into full-time education. And she was a teacher and she knew that I was a bit all over the place. So she knew that I kind of needed a focus. But in reality, probably, you know, when I left, I definitely didn't know myself when I left home. So that year and a half or whatever I spent at drama school was totally fucked. And when I was kicked out of there, I didn't know what to do. What do thespians do? They go and get jobs in telemarketing or sales or whatever. So I'm running my own business now, and day to day, it's still not, you know, I'm great from a commercial perspective. I can make you money like really fast, but can never seem to keep my own, ironically. But I think I didn't want to be the bipolar businessman. This is not like a dream for me.
This wasn't your like 8-year-old, like, what do you want to be when you grow up?
I don't want to, specifically, I like the concept of entrepreneur, but now it's overused and it just pisses me off how everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. And basically what you've done is you've made everyone look like they just dick about. So there's this concept of entrepreneurs now where it's like, he's an entrepreneur. They kind of fluff about. They don't really do much. They talk about a lot of ideas, but it's all bullshit. And so there's that kind of thing. I didn't really aspire to be. I mean, my first year in sales, I went to an audition for Lambda, which is another major drama school, and I was given a recall audition, and I didn't go, almost because of like the anxiety of going back to that after I'd started to earn some money month by month and I was feeling a little bit more comfortable. But I really wanted to go, but I don't I don't know why, but something stopped me. I don't know whether it was this fear of rejection or what if they then turn me down or whatever.
Yeah, not being liked.
But, you know, I still don't know what it was that stopped it. And then I continued in sales. And I set my own business up when I was 20, but there's every day I'm questioning what the hell do I want to do. Frankly, if I could just work at Lego and introduce Lego to businesses as a mental health stimulus, I think that's probably the role of a lifetime. You know,
they use it in leadership, don't they? They use Lego.
Yeah. So actually, do you know what? LinkedIn send me things about, because I'm a Lego obsessive. So like they send me things about Lego all the time. But when I was going to school, part of the context of what I was saying there was, it was like, if you're not going to IT or finance, or you're going to be a lawyer,
it's not real.
I had loads of Indian friends at school, and they all wanted to be doctors and lawyers. It was very much driven by the parents there. But my mum and dad had never really said, this is what you have to do. So I had kind of flexibility. It wasn't like they oppressed me or said, you have to do X, Y, and Z.
That can feel overwhelming, right?
And stuff.
It can feel
overwhelming. In that sense, that was kind of cool. But probably they felt like he's got enough on his plate without us telling him what to do as a job. But then once I was in a job, I was saying to my mum, I want to be a millionaire and all this kind of thing. I don't ever want to have to worry about money and this kind of stuff. And she was saying, it's okay that you're not going to be a millionaire. You don't have to stress about that and blah, blah, blah. And I would call her up and I would talk about how sad I was doing sales jobs and this kind of stuff and working in a business. And she said, you've got to stick at it. I've never liked my job. For the majority of the time I've been teaching, I've not liked it. And you just have to do that. That's how life works. And you have to go on and you have to make your money in that role and that kind of thing. And I've never been willing to accept that.
Right.
But I never knew how to bridge the gap to what I really wanted to do. And then I was always fearful. It's not like even really worried about whether I got any acting jobs, right? I was convinced I was going to kick everyone's ass anyway. I'm still convinced that I'm probably a better actor than most of the people who come out of my drama school, but because I'm three-dimensional and they just, live in the baseline, right?
Yeah.
So, but it's how do you find that mechanic that makes you tick, in a sense, I guess, is a big question.
Yeah, I think it's this is what I mean. Like your mum's messaging to you with the best intentions in the world is pretty much play small. Just be careful. Just make some money. Just stick with it. Like almost a subtle encouragement to just play small, which I think lots of people, not only with mental health issues, but if they don't fit into the system, so to speak, it's like, you'll be okay, that sort of thing. What I am hearing from you is that purpose is important. So as far as looking after our mental health, whether it's a job or a business, it doesn't have to be the thing. It's not like the one. It's just like something that lights your heart on fire or allows you to feel purposeful and, maybe kind of helps you go, I'm not going to jump off the bridge today because I've got these clients or I've got this thing I've got to create, or right? It gives you a bit of momentum. So I'm curious, just me and you could talk about mental health all day, I think. But I'm curious about how you look after your mental health now. So I know you've got visibility. I know you're talking a lot and you're highlighting the issues around men's mental health and the need to speak out. You're also running a business. You're also still have bipolar. You still have a history, like all that sort of stuff. Like, how do you actually look after your mental health to the point of sustaining your own success?
I would say that one of the biggest things is definitely getting involved with people 100%. Because even going and sitting at a mental health conference, and there is a big stigma attached to them in itself, because people think it's just going to be a bunch of weepy people on stage, which is where I try and bring the energy. But working and seeing people establish their own conclusions about who they are, and seeing traits in them that are maybe negative traits that they've overcome or maybe not overcome, but traits that I see in myself, I don't take advice from anybody. So if you say, you're a bit of a tosser, you kind of act like this, it's difficult for me to get my head around because I don't like discipline.
Okay.
But at the same time, I find that it's really helping me watching other people evolve and sort of understand what they've been through. And if I recognize a negative trait, then how do I look at kind of working through that? You know, body has also been a big thing. So my partner's into vegan sort of lifestyle. And so I cut out beef and I cut out pork and I cut out dairy pretty much completely. Because I did a lot of research on the anxiety related to this kind of stuff and the endorphins that are trapped within the meat upon the animal's death and this kind of stuff. And so for me, that was scientific enough to say, okay, we can all talk about veganism and we can all suggest that they're all a bunch of hippies and this kind of thing. But to be fair, the top, I think the most watched sport in the world is basketball, NBA basketball. And the top 7 players in the NBA basketball leagues are all vegan, right? So when you've got that kind of thing up against the context that there's this anxiety that could be adding, you know, I didn't know, you know, whether meat would add this anxiety or whether it was some kind of propaganda. But at the same time, I thought, you know, let's just try it and see if that has any effect on how I feel or how I'm feeling day to day. And fundamentally, I mean, massively with the dairy, you know, massively with the dairy. Yeah. So initially I just switched to soya milk, and I didn't really eat crazy amount of cheese anyway, but consciously making the effort not to have cheese kind of got me to the point where actually I felt like, in the nicest possible way, listeners, I was pooing nicely. My stomach was feeling great. Yeah. I wasn't feeling, you know, this turmoil all the time. So it was kind of, it went from my body just feeling kind of in disarray to feeling much better, or certainly more energized in myself. And so that was kind of that. I'm not saying, you know, I'm healthy every day. Love a bit of Deliveroo, Wagamamas. I've got your number. But at the same time, I'm trying to choose foods that are healthier. When I used to be a younger salesman, I was running around and I was just eating crap and whatever I could consume quickly, you know, I would. But now in London, it's a bit different, where you've got all sorts of options for sushis and all sorts of things. So you've got a bit more flexibility. It costs you about 20 quid a head just to get a takeaway lunch nowadays, which is mental in itself. Yeah. But at the same time, at least I'm making a conscious decision to try and choose something healthy to make myself feel better, and recognizing that probably that has an effect on me. Whereas before I would have just been drinking, eating KFC, whatever, and then being like, oh, why do I feel like absolute shit? Well, it's because you're drinking 5 pints a night and you're eating a KFC or a McDonald's before you go to bed. Yeah.
So it's thinking about the whole person, not just the fact that you've got a mental health condition and therefore need psychological, whatever, therapy or medication or whatever. But there's like thinking about the health of your whole body affects your mind.
Most people don't think about that at all. So you go to a doctor and they say, okay, here, have some antidepressants. But frankly, if you weren't eating so much shit and drinking so much shit,
they don't even ask you.
Then you wouldn't feel crap anyway, right?
Yeah.
Alcohol is a depressant. So if you put a certain amount of it in your body, after time, when you've got no water left in your body, you're going to feel like shit. So fundamentally for me, that was a big thing. I'm not saying it's easy to drop alcohol or whatever. I'm just saying a lot of these areas just require a bit more moderation. Doesn't matter if you're vegan, doesn't matter if you're a meat eater, whatever. But if
think about it, add it into your discussion around looking after yourself, right?
Yeah, just think about what it's doing for you.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got 12 years to change the planet, for example. And if we don't get our finger out, we're fucked. So fundamentally, if everybody stopped eating beef tomorrow, that would decrease carbon dioxide and damage to the earth by 75%. And that's just the cows, guys.
Yeah. That's one step.
For me, all of these kind of elements were like, okay, well, I'm going to be in a healthier environment. I'm not going to have this stuff just festering in my stomach all the time, trying to digest, which frankly, it doesn't very well anyway. All the cavemen in the past, you know, are living longer, the ones that eat leaves versus the ones that have eaten meat, albeit sustainable either way. So I was like, there's got to be something in this, you know? And I think if we try and focus on that as a first point of call, even the eating healthier means you don't necessarily have to stop getting pissed every now and then, right? But you just have to be aware that actually, if you feel like shit the next day or you feel in a lull, that gin and tonic was probably what did it. And it's not actually something wrong with you. Something's out of balance and you just need to look at changing that. Do you have vitamins the next day, etc.?
Do you take medication? Do you need medication to also help balance things out?
I probably need all sorts of medication, to be honest, but I don't take any medication, really.
Okay. So you use sort of healthier ways to manage what's going on for you?
To some degree, you know, in the past for a long time, I've smoked marijuana and stuff like that because I felt that was the only thing that kind of calmed me down, in a sense. So my brain is so erratic that when I became an entrepreneur and got into business, even in the evenings, I'm constantly thinking, and it's kind of my mind is buzzing. So I kind of, for a long time, that was a way of controlling that focus. And so over a period of about 14 years, I've gone from all the ideas and creative energy and crazy stuff, which doesn't really direct you in the right manner, but is very nice, down to refining what that looks like so that I can manage my daily basis. Now I have 2 companies. It's very simple what those companies do for me. It's organized and it's kind of not easy to execute because running your own business isn't easy to execute, but I'm kind of just trying to compartmentalize different elements. What creates stress in my working day? What creates stress in the way I live my life? You know, I walk a lot. I've got 3 dogs, you know, so automatically you've got a different level of energy when you're getting up and you have to do these kind of things.
Yeah, so it's thinking of
that's the take home, really.
Yeah, so it's what's relatable for you, and it sounds like you've tried lots of different things. So experiment, test it, read, educate yourself, understand the science behind it, and essentially do the things that are in your control to look after yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the biggest thing really, I think, is once you understand or have a label to some degree. So everybody wants to put you in a box, but once you understand or have a label to some degree as to what's going on with you, then you've got options.
Okay.
But it wasn't until I fully understood that there was a clinical issue with me that I was able to go, okay, what are these options? And then start to try and slowly compartmentalize those so that I could find what worked for me. And I'm not an angel, right? But at the same time, I feel pretty positive, and I really feel in a state now where I can't even imagine the concept of waking up tomorrow and wanting to take my own life. I cannot even imagine it.
So that's just night and day now.
Yeah, and even from being there and being in those moments where it was at that extreme, I still don't feel, I feel like it would take a lot. I mean, it would take a lot to get me anywhere near, even close to comprehension of that. So, you know, I'm driven. I don't know what the hell I want in life. I don't think anybody does. Obviously that job at Lego, but apart from that, you know, I just want to focus on my son and I want to give him options. Mm-hmm. I want him to know that if you play with Lego for the first 10 years of your life hardcore, you could be designing Lego and creating play sets, my friend. You don't have to be in IT. You don't have to be an accountant or a doctor. Okay.
Just go with the fun.
So I'll try not to oppress him with Lego. You know, I'll give him other options as well so he can be a bit more varied. But you get my point anyway. I think it's, you know, one of my psychologists said to me at one point, the biggest advancement for your mental health, especially with the relationship with your father, will be when you have a child, preferably a son, to kind of be what you missed. So I know how to raise a child off the back of Robin Williams alone.
Sure.
You know, because these types of guys, they were my father figures, and you know, I was obsessed with movie, and that was what gave me the fundamental teachings of what it is to be a good bloke, what it is to care, what it is to be empathetic and not to bully people or make them feel like shit, you know. And so I think now my whole focus is just around how I can improve some of the really negative attributes that I have accumulated over the years, some through my own fault and some not through my own fault. And then how can I shield him from some of the negativity there, and also just make him feel like there are options and he doesn't have to feel like he has to follow that societal path. Amazing.
I know that I've got 2 kids, and it's pretty scary when we don't do the inner work and begin repeating patterns from our past, without intending to. That's a fucking wake-up call. But it's also a good motivator.
I agree. Yeah. I'm feeling that pressure.
Yes, yours is quite young. Mine are quite a bit bigger. But but it's a great motivator as well if you do the relentless self-work through varying means and learn to manage your own mental health. Thomas, we're out of time. I feel like I'll have to get you on again, and we'll just have to talk work. We'll have to talk entrepreneurial, because I'm in that space where, it's about hustle, right? It's about hard work.
Yeah, I should be motivating you to be an entrepreneur, not saying sack that off and
go and get a job. No, I think what you're saying is be an authentic entrepreneur. If you are one and you have a mission that you want to create, well, then work your ass off for it, but also look after yourself, right?
And don't be disingenuous. No, I agree.
I think across the board, it's the disingenuous that's fucking annoying, right? It's the people who are living the fake version, as we talked about earlier, through their kind of Instagram idea of who they think they should be, and are coming to me as a therapist. Literally, the amount of clients I have that are 30-something going, I'm miserable, but everyone thinks I'm this, and I'm on this track, and I don't even want to do it, And I'm like, it's never too late. Switch it all up, Think for yourself, right? Who knew that my cult upbringing would give me such a strong voice for the people, right?
I know, yeah.
Think for themselves, right?
You are preaching. It's good. It's good, but it's in the right vein now.
You get it, though.
You're good to go.
I'm preaching to the converted in this case.
Exactly. Well, I agree. I
think we'll preach together at some point when it comes to mental health, and even clinicians. Like, I want to shake a few clinicians and just get them back to the human element of empathy and truly listening.
I've got loads. They all want my number so they can talk about curing me. So I'll pass them over.
Let's do that. Let's do it. Thomas, thank you so much for your time and telling us a little bit about your story. If people want to connect with you in some way, where can they find you? Obviously, the blog, the Bipolar Businessman. Anywhere else?
I would say probably that's the best way to go. So the blog is a great starting point, but I'm on LinkedIn, and there has to be some degree of anonymity. But I've got a Facebook page which is growing by about 100 likes a day. Yeah. Which will probably be 30 or 40,000 in the next 6 to 12 months, and then. So I'm trying to find different ways for people to interact. So I've got a LinkedIn page, I've got my Facebook page, and the blog as well, so that people feel like they can contact me direct.
Yeah.
The most important thing is just that I'm always open. So I don't really care if you've got issues. By all means, come and talk to me about them. I'm not going to send you away and say, I'm too busy, etc., because that's what I got. So I'm constantly getting told off at home for talking to too many people, but at the same time, I think it's important to do so every now and then,
Absolutely.
So feel free to get in touch.
We'll put all of that into the show notes. Sounds like that's part of your purpose in turning your adversity into your advantage. Thomas, thank you so much. I'm sure we'll be in touch soon.
No worries. Thanks very much for your time.